NBC General Hospital spoilers reveal that Brook Lynn had always imagined that the day she discovered she was pregnant would be one filled with celebration, a moment she and Chase would welcome with happy tears and whispered promises about the future. But life in Port Charles rarely delivered happiness in a clean, uncomplicated package. When the doctor confirmed her unexpected pregnancy, Brook Lynn felt joy surge through her like a lightning strike, powerful, overwhelming, and blinding in the best possible way. It was a miracle she never thought she'd experience, a blessing she once believed her body might never allow, and for one breathtaking moment she felt the entire world expand with new hope. But that moment lasted only until the reality of her fractured marriage crashed back into her chest. Chase, the man she loved and the father of the child now growing inside her, was spiraling deeper into an obsession that had already torn their relationship apart. His blind loyalty to Willow, his need to protect her, defend her, rescue her from consequences she fully deserved had pushed him far beyond the boundaries of logic or trust. And now, as Brook Lynn carried the first sign of a family they had once fought so hard to build, she found herself standing on the edge of a future that could shatter before it ever had a chance to begin. Every instinct inside her screamed that she had to save Chase before he destroyed himself completely. But she also knew that saving him meant confronting the darkest truth of all. His dangerous, irrational devotion to Willow was poisoning everything he touched. No matter how many times Brook Lynn pleaded with him to step back, Chase insisted Willow was being framed, that she was innocent, that Michael and the system were targeting her unfairly. He never even considered the possibility that Willow had manipulated him, used him, or lied to him despite all the evidence staring him in the face. And now, as Brook Lynn carried his child, she realized she could no longer ignore the danger he was creating for himself, for her, and for their unborn baby. The key incident was the final straw. Chase had insisted he never planted the key to Drew's house on Michael's ring, but he also refused to reveal why he ever had it in his possession, or what really happened in the moments leading up to that discovery. Brook Lynn could no longer accept half-truths or evasions. She confronted him with a fierceness she rarely unleashed, her voice trembling not with anger but with heartbreak. She demanded the truth not for Michael, not for Willow, not for the PCPD, but for their growing child who deserved two parents who trusted each other. The tension between them exploded as Chase tried to deflect, insisting that protecting Willow was more important than defending himself. His refusal to face the truth of Willow's actions left Brook Lynn stunned. How could the man who vowed to love and honor her choose someone else's innocence over their entire future? How could he cling to Willow so blindly while his own life was collapsing beneath him? Brook Lynn realized that Chase wasn't simply misguided, he was unraveling. And if she didn't intervene soon, he would lose everything. The pregnancy should have been their second chance, the miracle capable of pulling them back together. Instead, it became the catalyst for a reckoning that had been building for months. For the first time, Chase saw the devastation in Brook Lynn's eyes, the fear that he was no longer the man she married, the fear that he was slipping beyond her reach, the fear that their child might grow up in the shadow of his self-destruction. The moment she whispered, "I can't raise this baby with someone who won't tell me the truth," the entire course of their relationship shifted. It was no longer about Willow's crimes or Michael's innocence. It was about Chase choosing between the woman carrying his child and the woman he believed he needed to save. That single decision became the turning point of the GH storyline, a dramatic shift that rippled through every character connected to them. With Brook Lynn pregnant, the stakes were suddenly higher than ever. If Chase continued to protect Willow, he risked losing his marriage, his child, his badge, and every piece of stability he had left. And if he finally admitted the truth about the key, about Willow, about how deep he had fallen into manipulation, it would ignite a chain reaction that could expose the darkest secrets in Port Charles. Brook Lynn stood at the center of the storm, stronger than she had ever been, determined to protect her baby at any cost. Whether Chase rose or fell from here on out depended entirely on one thing: whether he chose to save the family he already had or continue fighting for the woman who had nearly destroyed him. Chase had always believed that love, loyalty, and a sense of justice would guide him through every storm in Port Charles, but for the first time in his life he could no longer trust his own instincts. The illusion he built around Willow had begun to crack, and as those fractures widened, he finally saw the truth with a clarity that cut deeper than any wound. He was never Willow's hero, he was her instrument, the perfect tool she sculpted from sympathy and guilt, a man whose inherent goodness could be twisted into blind devotion. Every tear Willow shed, every trembling confession, every plea for him to believe her had been designed to draw him further away from the stability he built with Brook Lynn. And Chase, desperate to right the wrongs of his past, had walked straight into the trap. Now, standing on the precipice of losing everything he ever wanted, a wife who loved him, a home where he felt valued, in a future that finally seemed possible, he felt the weight of Willow's manipulation crush him from the inside out. But the moment he learned Brook Lynn was unexpectedly pregnant changed everything. It was as if the universe had delivered one final chance, a fragile miracle wrapped in hope, demanding that he stop spiraling before he dragged his entire family down with him. Brook Lynn's joy had been immediate and pure, the kind of happiness Chase had dreamed of bringing her one day, but her eyes quickly filled with worry because she could still sense the storm inside him. She knew, even without words, that Willow's shadow still hung over their marriage, and that truth terrified her more than anything. Chase saw that terror, saw her hands subconsciously tighten over her stomach, as if she feared he might not be the man their child needed him to be, and in that moment, the thin layer of denial he clung to finally collapsed. Protecting Willow had never been justice. It had never been empathy. It had been coercion disguised as trust, and Chase hated himself for not seeing it sooner. He replayed every detail of the key incident, the stolen keys, the timing, the look in Willow's eyes when she insisted Michael was framing her, and realized she had used him to plant doubt in the investigation from the beginning. She knew he would defend her. She counted on his compassion. She weaponized his past mistakes to keep him loyal. And Chase, blinded by a savior complex he thought he had buried long ago, had fallen for every part of it. Now he understood the full gravity of what he had done, not only as a detective or as a quartermain by marriage, but as a man who promised Brook Lynn honesty and partnership. He had betrayed her trust long before the key incident ever happened. The only question left was whether he could salvage the pieces before the damage became permanent. The fear of losing Brook Lynn haunted him day and night. He imagined her walking away, imagined his child growing up believing their father had chosen another woman over his own family, imagined Tracy banishing him from the estate, and every scenario left him hollow. But there was one truth he could no longer run from. Brook Lynn deserved the whole story, not the filtered version, not the version that protected his ego. She deserved to hear how deeply Willow had manipulated him, and how willingly he let himself fall into that trap. Chase knew that confessing everything might be the final blow to a marriage already on the brink, but silence would be far worse. Silence was what kept him chained to Willow's narrative. Silence was what destroyed the man he believed himself to be. So he prepared to tell Brook Lynn everything, even though the thought nearly ripped him apart. He rehearsed the words alone in the dark, imagining the look of betrayal that would cross her face, the tears she would try to hide, the disappointment that would strike harder than any punishment the PCPD could impose. And yet, despite all the dread, there was a flicker of hope because this confession was his first step back toward the truth, back toward the family he so desperately wanted to protect. He knew Brook Lynn loved fiercely, but she also fought fiercely, and if he didn't show her he was willing to fight for them too, he would lose her forever. Meanwhile, the world around them tightened with danger because Willow was unraveling as well. She sensed Chase pulling away, sensed the awakening inside him, and like all cornered manipulators, she grew unpredictable. Brook Lynn's pregnancy made everything more volatile, increasing the stakes and adding urgency to Chase's confession. The chaos surrounding them no longer felt like a storyline or a misunderstanding. It felt like a crackling fuse running straight through the heart of Port Charles. And Chase stood at its center, either the spark that would ignite everything, or the one who could stomp it out before it consumed them all. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not become a father while living a lie. He could not bring a child into the world while his soul was tethered to Willow's deceit. And he could not reclaim his future until he faced the woman he loved and revealed the full, painful, humiliating truth. For the first time in months, Chase felt clarity. He would confess everything to Brook Lynn. He would take whatever consequence came. He would fight to earn back the family he nearly ruined. Because the difference between being a tool and being a man was simple. This time, he was choosing the truth not for Willow, not for the PCPD, but for the child who deserved a father who finally knew who he was. Chase had never felt fear like this raw, electric, territorial fear that rose from somewhere deeper than instinct itself. The moment he learned Brook Lynn was carrying his child, something inside him shifted with violent force. The confusion, the self-doubt, the guilt over Willow, all of it burned away, leaving only one truth pulsing through his bloodstream. He would protect his baby at all costs, even if it meant destroying the very person who had nearly destroyed him. For months, Willow had twisted his sense of loyalty, feeding on his compassion, manipulating his need to do the right thing until he could no longer tell where her voice ended and his conscience began. But now, when he pictured the future tiny hands, a heartbeat stronger than his own, Brook Lynn smiling through tears, he finally understood the magnitude of the danger Willow posed, not just to Michael, not just to PCPD, but to his family. Willow had crossed lines that could not be unseen, and Chase no longer saw her as someone he failed to save. She was the threat, and he would do what he should have done from the beginning: stop her. The more he thought about how easily Willow had played him, the more violent the shift inside him became. He saw her face in a new light, not fragile, not wounded, but calculating. Every time she insisted she was terrified of losing Wiley, every time she whispered that Michael was the real danger, every time she clutched his hand and begged him to keep her secret, those moments once felt like honesty. Now he saw them for what they were, hooks dug deep under his skin, pulling him into a narrative she crafted with surgical precision. But the pregnancy snapped those hooks one by one, and when Chase looked back on Willow's lies, he felt something he never expected: rage. It started quietly at first, like a slow-building pressure behind his ribs. But once he realized the extent of her manipulation, how she used his badge, his integrity, his compassion as weapons against everyone he loved, the rage ignited into purpose. He remembered Wiley telling the truth. He remembered the key. He remembered every moment Willow had subtly redirected blame, every time she used Chase's loyalty to build her escape route. And he knew now that if Willow was cornered, she would burn everything around her to save herself. She would burn him. She would burn Brook Lynn. She would burn Michael. She would even burn the unborn child, if she believed it could buy her one more day of freedom. Chase could not allow that. So he made a decision, not as a detective, not as a quartermain, but as a father. He would no longer shield her. He would no longer excuse her. He would confront her with the full weight of every truth she forced him to ignore, and he would tear down the fragile facade she used to control him. Willow's days of hiding behind innocence were over, and Chase was prepared to deliver the final blow himself. When he finally stood before her, the shift in him was undeniable. He wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. His eyes no longer softened at her tears. His voice no longer trembled with doubt. And Willow, for the first time, looked afraid, not the performative fear she often wielded, but real fear. Fear that she had lost control. Fear that Chase no longer belonged to her story. Fear that everything she built on lies was about to collapse. He told her he knew everything. He told her her game was finished. He told her she would never again use him to hurt the people he loved. And the moment Willow realized she couldn't break him anymore, the last crack in her facade shattered. General Hospital had been hinting for months that Willow's descent would end in tragedy, but now the trajectory was locked in place. With Chase turning against her, with Michael protected, with Rick and Justine piecing together the evidence, Willow's downfall was no longer speculative, it was inevitable. And the most devastating part was that she knew it. The panic in her eyes as Chase stepped away from her for good was the first sign of a woman who finally understood she had no more lifelines left. Chase didn't look back. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. For the first time since this nightmare began, he walked away not as someone who needed saving, but as someone prepared to fight. For Brook Lynn, for their unborn child, for the future he almost lost. And behind him, Willow stood alone, her fate closing in like a tightening fist, the tragic ending she crafted with her own hands now sealing itself around her. The fall of Willow was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty.